Good afternoon, welcome to Compass. We have a special guest today, Jörg Imberger, who came all the way from Australia. He has been an adjunct professor here in the Department of Ocean Sciences for several years already, and he comes about once a year or so to work with Tamai and some other people, I think. And then he usually asks if he can give a seminar, and of course we were happy to let him give another seminar now. A little bit about his career. He got a bachelor's degree in civil engineering at the University of Melbourne in 1963, and then a master's degree in engineering science at the University of Western Australia in 1966, the year when I was born. Then he got a PhD at University of California, Berkeley in 1970. Then in the early 70s, for a while he was a lecturer and senior lecturer at the University of Western Australia. Then in 1976 he became an associate professor with tenure in Berkeley again. In 1979 he became the Winthrop Professor at the University of Western Australia. 1978 to 1981 he was the head of the Department of Civil Engineering. And then finally from 1981 to 2015 he was the director of the Center for Water Research in Perth. Currently he is still, as I already said, an adjunct professor here with us, and he is a visiting professor at the University of Venice in Italy, and just recently he also became an honorary professor at the University College London in the UK. Then his CV has a lot of other stuff, several study leaves, many honors and awards, 258 peer-reviewed journal articles with him as the first or co-author, 6 books, 19 book contributions, more than 80 PhD students, and many other things. If you want to know it in more detail, look at his webpage. I think this is actually it looks somewhat like this. And the talk today is like the first presentation of a lecture that he has prepared for a public presentation in Perth on November 26th. So if you happen to be in Perth at the end of November, you can go again, I think, and see this again. But you don't need to go there. You can see it here today, right here. And the title is The Health of the Swan River Estuary and the State of Water.
Thank you very much. I'd more be interested if you have some criticism how to improve it, because this is going to be a general public lecture with media and everything else there, so something not clear, please tell me. All right, so I'm being concerned about the Swan River, which I'll show you in a minute, goes through the city of Perth. There's Perth there. There's a little restaurant here which we frequent quite often, and boats and so. And this is called Kings Park, and it goes down like this. The health of this is in jeopardy. And secondly, I've been really wondering about all this global warming, the devil. I've been very much preoccupied with the devil, and I can't really, and I can't really justify spending so much time on it. I'll show you why. Every talk takes some people to help you with. Dr. Marty is down in Vermont, and Chris Delamore is in Melbourne, runs a company called Hydra Barracks. So I strongly urge you to go and look at their website, because all the software I'll be talking about is available for $50 executable code. So we're going to talk a little bit about the origins of changes in the weather. There's more than just CO2. Overview of the water resources in Western Australia. This is another thing. People don't actually open up their mind very much in general in the world. Then I'll have a look at the Swan River. And then I'll try to summarize a typical government response to a problem. And understanding the problems of real-time management, adaptive real-time management systems. I was at a meeting, last time I was here, there was this email came around that the city of Miami is hosting a community meeting. I went to that, and Mr. Schmidt was there. He's the CEO of CDM Schmidt, about flooding, forecasting, and so forth. And honestly, I thought I was back in the Stone Ages. You guys should get involved in this because it's. He's got a contract for $200 million from the city of Miami. And then show you how, in modern ways, issues can be managed. Why is this flipping so much? So let's start with the origins of the changes in the weather. The first thing in Australia you have to realize, probably many countries actually, is for thousands of years, the whole fauna and flora changed here. And this corresponds to the time the Aborigines came to Australia. And I'll show you what happened. They are the first agriculturalists of the world. So 60,000 years ago, 50, 60,000 years ago, it's a little bit of uncertainty, but the species seem to show a huge change of species. And they chopped down all the trees. They didn't chop them down with an axe, they didn't chop them down with a bulldozer, they basically set them on fire. And here's, why is that flicking so all the time?
It's a connection issue.
Oh, okay. Here's what a tree does. So think of the rain that comes down, falls here, goes into the surface layer, the tree pulls it back out again, wind blows it down here, the tree also puts in seeding particles, and it rains here. So they are fantastic colonialists. They bring their own rain and so forth. So they do two things basically. They sequester carbon, and they pump water out. If the tree weighs roughly, say, 10 tons, it'll pump 10 tons of water every day of the year into the atmosphere. So if you have a whole forest, it's a huge pump. If you chop it down, the whole thing changes. That's the first thing you have to realize. So if you put all that together in a more picture, so the moisture comes in from the ocean, it rains a bit, picks up little particles, water vapor goes out, and the recent research also shows that trees communicate with each other. So a baby tree tells mummy tree, hey, I need more water to survive. It passes the signal up wind, transpire more water, it rains more. I found that amazing when I heard that talk. So this is basically what happens. This water down here in the aquifers is 50 to 100,000 years old. So it's not regularly communicating at all in the world with rain.
Is that fresh water down there?
In one couple of the layers are fresh, couple are not. So we went from this sort of fauna and flora all over the country. This is my property down in Margaret River. There's a guy in Chile, Santiago, he was an ex-PhD student, he's now professor. He said he no longer welcomes anybody who comes in an aeroplane because we're in the middle of a global warming emergency. I sent him my pictures of my forest, and I said I'm negative, I'll put him on my accounting sheet, God will be okay with it, me coming, but he didn't say hello, he forgot about it. Anyhow, we went from this to this. They burnt it down not to chase the animals towards them as people thought. Basically, this is a much better way for the animals to be hunted. They're more open, kangaroos and so on, so they've made a much better living. And humans do much the same thing, but they do it much faster. I mean, sorry, not humans, white fellows. We do much the same thing, agriculture, to grow food. So that's the biggest influence. The second big influence is, of course, CO2 in the atmosphere. Here's the oscillation until very recently, and recently it went up by roughly 100 parts per million, which corresponds to roughly 1.5 degrees and so forth. What happens is, as the Earth gets warmer, there's more moisture in the atmosphere. So just like when you boil a kettle, it's more violent. If you look at a big cloud, I mean, a big cloud has about 2 or 3 Hiroshima bombs in it. That's how much energy there is in it. So the more bombs you set off, the more violent the Earth gets, and I'll show you that in a minute. So let's look at the resources. So everybody's panicking in Australia and the US and everywhere else about global warming. Well, if you look at this, it's the rainfall all of Western Australia from 1900, I think, to the present. You see it's going up. I mean, overall the world's getting more rain, there's more moisture in the air, but it's getting more violent. There's a huge groundwater underneath Perth, for 1,000 years worth of clean water underneath, a kilometre and a half down. So why anybody's worried about, I mean, this is no longer falling in the right spot, it's no longer in Perth, it's in the north. But you know, Aborigines were nomadic, they just moved where the weather was good. But the white fella has a big house, he's got to stay in the big house, so he can't move. Also, if you opened up agriculture to the farmers and allowed them to grow carbon and biodiversity, food, or educate people, things would change very rapidly. But again, you know, farmers are constantly maligned for introducing phosphorus and so forth into the streams. They're told to grow trees, but nobody gives them any money, so obviously they can't do it. Being a farmer these days is not an easy task. So there's no shortage of water, but people constantly complain. Here's an example of what I'm saying. In the north, this is cyclones from 1930 to 1940. This is the present. And you can see each line is a very severe cyclone, and this color represents the intensity. So as the humidity picks up, things get more violent. And so there's a huge amount of rain, more rain in the north of Australia than was previously. These are irrelevant, these pictures. So really, it's the question is, what is land clearing doing and what is CO2 doing? And this answers this question here. And Mark Andrews and I did a paper, three papers quite a long time ago, where we plotted the rainfall in Cape Loon, which is a coastal station, divided by the same station back in 1900. And you can see there's no change until you get about to 2000, and there's a drop. If you plot an inland station divided by this station, there's a major drop in the 1960s and 70s. And this drop is due to land clearing. So about 70% of the changes are due to land clearing. This has been getting stronger, so we have two effects coming together. I haven't seen a single paper that actually says what's the effect of this impact on this one, how do they interact. That would be an interesting PhD thesis. Sorry. So, another source is, of course, desalination. And the Premier of the state of Western Australia coined the phrase, desalination is independent of the weather. There's a really key issue, like the first Englishman came and said the natives are part of the fauna and flora. As soon as they officially said that, then of course you can do anything to the natives and fauna. This is a lie, because of course, but it was a really good slogan, and it's caught on globally around the world, everywhere I go. Desalination. Israel, they've changed the whole water system to desalination because it's independent of the weather. But you know, the CO2 you introduce makes it not independent of weather. We did some work here, desalination plume, and I'll show you this numerical simulation of the effluent coming in here, going down the channel. And the fear was that the heavy salty water would fill up the very bottom part, cause it to stratify, cause oxygen levels to drop and so forth. But we showed that wasn't the case. So you can certainly design these things to have minimum environmental impact from an outfall point of view, but of course they're emitting CO2 because they're using a huge amount of power. And also a desalination plant is not much good for a farmer. It would be just too expensive to grow your crops with desalinated water. Although I'm working with a guy in Perth now, he's from Singapore. He has a food cube, a company that produces food in a room. In a room of 2 meters times 2 meters, he can produce enough food for 200 people by changing the environment. So I'm getting together with restaurateurs and so forth, so they can all grow their own vegetables. So there's a lot of activity happening here lately. So let's look at the state of the Swan River. It's a beautiful place. And if you imagine standing here, there's a beautiful restaurant here, little boats coming in and out, Kings Park coming down. If you brought Kings Park all the way down to the airport, given the biodiversity I'll show you in a minute, you could call Perth the Garden City of the world. Here is the river. It's quite long. Allen Brook, Swan River comes down. joined by Alina, goes through the estuary. And here's the mouth of the river. And it's removal of the intersilt. So in 1900, one of the heroes of the day, C.O.A. O'Connor, a civil engineer, built a harbour. There used to be a sill right at Fremantle, which prevented the salt water from going in. So it was a freshwater estuary, mixing with ease, and so oxygen levels were always high. Then they started to farm in this whole area, and more nutrients came in. So it was both stratified and nutrients. Algae grew on the surface, settled into the salt wedge, oxygen dropped to nothing, and recycled the nutrients very quickly. Then they cleared all the fringing vegetation, because you know when somebody builds a house, a white man, they like to see the scenery, so they chop everything down in front of them. People are really amazing. And there's a rainfall reduction because of the clearing of the forest. So most of the ills of the Swan River had nothing to do with global warming, until very, very recently maybe. So most of them due to land clearing. Sorry about this computer. Here's the definition of the problem. You can see the salt wedge coming in underneath, temperature. Right? Should I try connecting it differently?
No, I think, yeah, we could try a different adapter, but
And you see the oxygen, so zero.
just continue.
So I pronounced the river dead, as I'll show you in a minute, 2008. It was in the newspaper. The next day, a dolphin poked its head out of the water, and the Premier saw it, the governor. He called me up and he said, look, you all up, I won't use the Australian expression, you're all wrong. And I said to him, look, crabs and prawns are dead underneath. They're not related to Jesus. There's going to be no resurrection. I'll have to crawl all the way in again. And that message seemed to get through to him. Pretty quick now, yeah. So here's the coastal ocean. I'll go walking along here every morning. It's still pretty clean. I'll show you a picture in a minute. Here's one of our pieces of equipment. Let's look south. If I play that movie, you'll see when the probe goes down, I put a GoPro on it. I'll just fast forward that and you'll see. A friend came to visit. Fish are very interested in instruments. The probe's going down, about to hit the bottom. It's pretty clear, see the fish coming along. And in a minute you'll see a most spectacular fish you've ever seen. Putting a GoPro on the equipment changed the whole morale on the boat. Everybody kept looking at the screen, and we also had a drone above us so we could see. Is he coming yet? The probe is now sitting on the bottom taking data. It's worth waiting for. It's an amazing fish. There he is. Coming to say hello. You compare that with this scene that's upstream of the Swan River. Same GoPro, same boat, same instrument, same people. And you'll see a totally different ecosystem. Well, there's no ecosystem left, it's all dead. See how brown the water is? That's because the salt wedge goes underneath. Algae that grow dies falls into it. Nutrients get recycled, oxygen levels drop to nothing. And basically, a meter underneath the surface, everything is dead. So here's a summary of the findings. For about 6 or 7 months of the year, oxygen below 1 meter or 1.5 meters is essentially zero. So nothing can grow there. Now the politicians that I'll show you in a minute blame it on the farmers. And here are the pictures from the surface. Here is the water underneath. But you know, we eat the food. So why are we blaming the farmers? Looks okay from the surface. Here's a blown up version of the oxygen. Wherever it's blue, there's no life possible. There's about 60 kilometers each one of these shots. And really from May to December, it's basically dead. Sometimes it comes to the surface, and it's quite interesting about humans. Again, I deal quite a lot with big companies, and in Flux, the impeller company in Sweden, I talked to them at length and I said, look, we can't give you any money until you find something that you see on the surface. Lake Erie apparently still has a lot of fish kills. So I need to find a lake which have enormous fish kills which we can fix. They're not interested in what's in the cemetery underneath. It's quite, and they were quite honest with me. So,
It had enormous fish kills, and what was the second thing?
say again?
You said that you're interested in a lake that has enormous fish kills, and I missed
Yeah.
the second.
Maybe we can talk later if you know one, which we could fix. Then they're happy to have money. But you know, it's really strange. So look at the government response. This is the federal government and the West Australian government. They said, oh, it's phosphorus, phosphorus, phosphorus. That's the only thing in their brains. Slow release water soluble. Clays on the bottom, artificial wetlands. But you know, if you do the calculation, these wetlands have to be enormous to soak up any phosphorus. Minimize settlement, nutrient intervention, etc. And then they said, oh, you know, when you go to hospital, you get oxygen, right? You watch this.
Bubble up.
And then they just made a bunch of laws. These are the things that they have to obey. Very, very few of the things. And this is the movie. See the scum on the surface? I'll show you.
Bubblers?
They're spending $15 million on oxygenating the water. Does it tell you anything that you see what you see on the surface? Most of the oxygen is just bubbling out of the water, out into the air. Do you think I can get anybody to listen even? You watch the probe go down in a minute, we're heading off towards it, there it is. $15 million on aerating an area that extends no more than 200 or 300 meters up north and south.
So that's a place where they're bubbling pure oxygen in?
Yeah.
The bubbling pure oxygen as well.
Pure oxygen.
It's not that they just
No, pure oxygen.
pure oxygen.
But you know, when I
They
show
don't even do that on shrimp farms. Which
when
they
I
have.
show them the bubbles, it doesn't register. I mean, obviously the oxygen is not going into the water; it's coming out into the air. And actually, if you get close in the boat, you get high because it's oxygen-rich atmosphere. Yeah. See the bubbles? So, life support system and phosphorus. But the sad thing is that it's not having an impact. So, we set up this new technology, adaptive real-time management. So here's the domain. I've talked about this slide before here, I think. Then you have, it's now called Hydra Hub. Chris Delamore's taken it over. This is by the database manager. And it manages meteorological models, WRF, dynamic models, AMD3, a biogeochemical model, surface waves, groundwater models, catchment models, and so on. And the data is only used for self-learning. In other words, if the model doesn't predict what the data is saying, there's an AI interface that cleans the models up. Then you can view it and you communicate with the observer. Boundary conditions usually come from HICOM ocean ones, Wave Watch 3, NOAA, and the weather and so forth. So we nest down WF, come down, and this is running in real time. Also it's running in forecast mode. So the advantage of this is that, you know, if you want to go for a picnic in 2 weeks' time, you look at this website, see what sort of day you've chosen. Every school, the 80 primary and high schools, had all this running in real time for them. The kids would get up in the morning, look at the weather. And that wasn't important. The fact was that they became aware of the weather. That's a big change, the whole society. So that's that. Now, how do you
You're going
use
to
it?
tell us what the output is?
Or whatever you want. You go all the way from pathogens, bacteria, plankton, phytoplankton, zooplankton, fish, weather, temperature, salinity, oxygen. And I'll show you a little movie later on. So these are the various domains. You see WF domain is very large to start off with, nested down over this area here. And here are the various, that's the large domain, next one. We're doing the same thing at the moment in Idaho with a company. There seems to be a lot of debate about WRF. And my guys kind of set it up and ran it, and I never had to do anything except say do it. But they want $1 million to set up WRF, the commercial entities up there. So I'm not quite sure what's going on. For us, it gave excellent results. Then you put out a bunch of in situ equipment just to see how well your model is doing. I've called these lake diagnostic systems, like when you go to the doctor, he measures your temperature to diagnose what's going on. So these measures the temperature of the lake, salinity. Once you get to oxygen chlorophyll, you can do it, but it becomes pretty expensive because you have to check them all the time. You have a nice met station, and this is coming in real time to the model. This is a wave gauge that I designed, built, basically pressure sensors across, and from that you can get the direction of the waves. These are just standard river gauges and so forth. You'll recognize the ADCP. This is called the control Lagrangian drogue. This is an instrument. I realize that fish don't swim from one place to the other. They basically go up and down and then go with the current. So this instrument comes up, takes its measurements, says, where do you want me to go? Go over there, but it can't swim over there, so go to this depth and you'll float over there, come up again. You leave it out for 6 months, and it takes a profile every hour. Now, all of this equipment is for hire now from Idaho. There's a guy up there who runs a small company called Jim Brock. I've shipped it all to him, and you can rent it if you want it. You can also rent him if you want. It's very good. Then we have the equipment for the process stuff. Am I running behind time? A boat that could be, I've sold that now, but then this is the pride and joy. This is called the portable flux profiler. I've talked about this before here. Turbulent structure, fine scale structure, and a lot of biology. If you ever want anybody here that wants to use it, just call up Jim and he'll come down and show you how to use it. In the field, we never went out in the field before we didn't know what to expect. So I used to drop the probe down physically, Dr. Marty used to do it in a model. By the time I yanked it up, it was 60 kilograms, that's why my back is bad, I think. 2 profiles were overlaid. And I could tell exactly what's going on, what's happening, so it was great. That's just by the way. So, when you have this sort of information, managing the issues. How can we fix the Swan River? Quite easily. If we build a little, there's a bridge here in Fremantle that goes across the river. We just put some plastic sheeting to stop the salt from going in. I mean, the pressure on the plastic will be minimal. It's only the difference between the density of plastic and the density of fresh water. You'd end up with a freshwater estuary, which means the wind could mix it down every day of the week, so you wouldn't have all this low oxygen. It's a question of whether it'll still be too high in nutrients, but somebody's looking at that at the moment. It certainly would be a lot better than this system. I talked to the Premier, the Governor, and a whole bunch of other people. Interesting, Jörg, I said. No, nothing happened. Secondly, there's a, not young man, actually, elderly chap, who's got a patent on these tanks. They're hexagonal tanks, water tanks. He's got solar panels on the top. And his vision is to distribute this over the whole state and take the more rain in the north and just reticulate over Western Australia. Makes a lot of sense. He's all these inventors I'm dealing with are a little crazy, so he's struggling a bit. Very intense people. Now, what about your house? What can you do there? This is my backyard. I'm looking out from my office here, actually. So the first thing is trees use the sun energy to fix carbon dioxide, as you all know. If you burn the leaves, you'll release that energy, make electricity. There's an inventor in Western Australia who's designed a small house unit. You can gather the leaves, produce electricity. That could serve as the base load for the house. Solar energy and solar heating would still be the peak load. Then you have a water tank, and then you have a water heat exchanger. My great-great-uncle in Jerusalem had a house built in 18 something or other. Storage area, a water tank, and a heat exchanger. So you heat this water up, and then you service all your hot water needs in the house, including heaters on the walls at night. So the only water you need to bring into the house is the scheme water, and that's less than 5% of what you use in the house. Then you take the storm water and you clean it up, put it back in the ground, you water your garden. Garden in Australia is about 40% of the water use. So you could really get rid of the mains electricity, minimal batteries, because lithium batteries are very dirty. Don't think they're the heaven. Also, they're 10% cobalt, which is mined in Africa and Zambia by child slave labor. So whatever you do, minimize your lithium batteries. I had lunch with Ronnie yesterday. He was very proud of his Tesla car. So I had to tell you. So really, you could design a house like that, provided you have a bit of a garden. I'm looking for a PhD student at the moment to work out how big would your garden have to be for this base load here to be sufficient to satisfy the average family. Depends on the vegetation, of course, and so on. The second thing is grow some forest. Now you can do this from the government's point of view, or you can do it like here. This is my property, my wife and my property down south. It's 10 hectares of bush. Australian bush sequesters about 10 tons of carbon, not CO2, carbon a hectare. So I'm sequestering every year about 100 tons of carbon. So I'm carbon neutral, or negative actually. Also, green space is now known. There's a guy in Illinois, Bob Sullivan, who shows you clearly that green space is good for your mind. Crime rate's much lower if you grow up in the backyard. And you don't have to wait for this to happen. But look at human behavior. The biggest challenge we have, I'm going to finish on this, is to change human behavior. This is what happened. These are the heroes. Swan River. James Stirling explored the Swan River in 1827. This guy, I'm not sure this is true, I can't believe it really. Apparently it's a hobby. He used to go on his horse on the weekend, ride out the bush, get a few Aboriginal girls, rape them, and then shoot them. Some knowledgeable people have told me that. I mean, I can't believe that, but that's... Fitzgerald petitioned UK to send more labour. So really we're looking at 100 years. 1950, increased rainfall, flooding. We cleared all that. Billabongs and everything out to make it hydraulically smoother. And really, as I said before, I pronounced it dead in 2008. This is human behavior. I was walking down the beach about 3 weeks ago and there was a guy spraying, obviously, weeds. And I said to him, "Oh, you're spraying invasive species?" "Yeah, I am." I said, "Oh, you're spraying people, are you?" He didn't think it was very funny. You know, we as humans are incredibly invasive. So, you've seen this movie before, but I didn't know who was coming today. So, when the system was all running, this adaptive real-time management, the kids could go out. This girl chose retention time. You can see red is about, I think it's about 90 days. She's 10 years old. I apologize for the people who have seen it before. Just think of yourself. Did you know that when you were 10?
Hi, today we are going to measure the salinity of the Swan River at Mosman Park. Salinity is the salt content in a wet environment like a river. We would expect a reading of 0 to 0.8.
Turns out she's from one of the wealthiest schools.
Of salt in a freshwater environment.
And she had a film director, a script writer, and a professional photographer.
We can measure
But that's okay, because all the country kids, there are 80 schools, took reference from this.
that passes through water.
The next girl was a history teacher, history student. Instead of learning history from a book, you learn it from the older generation. So the idea is to get everybody involved. And what we're doing at the moment...
Hello, my name is Isabella Taylor, and we are just about to interview Barry Johnson on the Swan River. Barry has been a resident of Mossman Park for the last 50 years and has used the Swan River for recreational purposes and activities since he was a child.
So the media teacher would have told her not to interview somebody in a windy area. The history teacher would have checked it out. The English teacher would have corrected the English. So you replace pen and paper with...
See a lot of sailing and lots of other family activities up in there.
So in conclusion, there are major weather changes occurring, that's for sure, but the solutions are all in our hands. First of all, there are many more resources, and secondly, even global warming. If you take global warming, for instance, if we take the tidal power, geothermal power, and the solar power of West Australia alone, it's 20 times the whole world energy needs. The Brazilians and the Russians are moving energy already 15,000 kilometers, a million volts DC. We could service all of Indonesia and all of China overnight. We could have coffee all day, we wouldn't have to do a thing anymore, you know. The world would be carbon neutral. And I've just managed to get a bit of a grant from somebody, a wealthy donor, to inspect again what would it take to reforest Australia. Because before the Aborigines, as I told you, it was all forest. If we did that just West Australia alone, in 30 years we'll be back to 1950 carbon levels. Isn't that just a bit amazing? Just Western Australia alone could fix the world problem. Do you think I can get anybody interested in political service? They like this global warming, it's the devil. The world spends over $600 billion on global research. And as I said in my last talk, I checked to see what determines 100,000 years in the glacial periodicity. If you can find me a paper, I'd like to see it. I'm writing on myself at the moment. So the solutions are at hand. The technical perspective for the future looks very positive. It's a question of whether we can change society to have the courage to act. And I'm very doubtful about that, because it's just...
Yeah, sounds has a familiar ring.
Yeah. 50 years ago we found the truth in Encyclopedia Britannica. Then we turned to social media and the truth is defined by something that's set off from that. 4 or 5 weeks ago I was down in a hotel with a friend of mine who runs a company that produces virtual reality goggles, software and hardware. So we had lunch and he said, "Do you want to try them?" I said, "Yeah, okay." So over the main meal we went to the Nullarbor with a bunch of Aborigines. And then he said, "Would you like to go to the Arctic?" I said, "Okay." So he turned on a different program, we went to the Arctic. And this guy was constantly talking to me, and his voice sounded very familiar. It was Al Gore. I had a conversation with Al Gore. It wasn't Al Gore. I mean, it was all simulated. Can you imagine what that effect will be in the hands of a company, big company? I mean, the truth will be defined by the virtual reality. If you combine that with the latest predictions about travel, the predictions are people will no longer travel because they don't have enough money to stay home with virtual goggles. So the truth will be just anything anybody determines. It's a huge challenge for our society. So I'm optimistic about this. We're trying to do our best. We've got a global project starting. Venice is now online. Paraguay is coming online. Cordoba in Argentina, I came back with $1 million to get the project going. We're going to set all this technology up. High school, primary schools will be involved, and hopefully we can spread this around so that people have one place. We're calling it Earthbook. Go Facebook to meet some people, go Earthbook to meet nature. It's looking positive. If we can make it happen, it'd be great. Thank you very much.